Even top scientists are simply scratching their heads and are baffled. With us today is Leslie Kean, author of the New York Times bestseller, UFOs. Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. Well, let's now talk about the JAL incident over Alaska. JAL is famous for having pilots and crews that are superbly trained, but they were flabbergasted when they saw a UFO. Explain.
Exactly, and this, again, refers to Japan Airlines. This was in 1986, and there were three pilots flying a cargo jet over Alaska, and they witnessed a series of objects. The whole event lasted for 30 minutes, which is quite extraordinary. The whole thing was captured on radar. The pilots were communicating to the ground control the whole time, and one of the objects that they saw was a very, very large kind of walnut-shaped thing that was just sort of sitting there. I mean, bigger than an aircraft carrier was the way the pilots described it. So, it's a fascinating story. The ground control actually said, well, should we send some jets up there to help you out, maybe some Air Force jets? And the pilot said, no, we'd rather not. He didn't want to risk any kind of dangerous encounter, but it was a long observation. The FAA investigated this and months later did put out a report, which was, of course, controversial, but it was investigated.
Okay, and once again, we have to take another short commercial break. But after the break, let's continue to talk about unexplained sightings, and then let's try to hypothesize about what they mean. Are they visitors from another planet? Is it nothing but natural phenomenon, mass hypnosis? Well, we're going to look at all these things in the next segment of Science Fantastic. Stay tuned.
You are listening to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Call Professor Kaku now at 1-800-449-8255.
We are the survivors of a disintegrated solar system. At this moment, the remainder of our fleet is circling your globe.
What do you want with me?
Arrange for your world leaders to confer with us in the city of Washington.
You're listening to Science Fantastic.
Welcome back to Science Fantastic with Professor Michio Kaku. Our special guest today is Leslie Kean, author of the New York Times bestseller, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. Well, we talked about the incident over Tehran when pilots actually tried to fire on a UFO. We talked about the Belgium incident where hundreds of eyewitnesses, including pilots sent up on F-16 jets, tried to intercept a UFO. And then we talked about the famous JAL, Japan Airlines UFO over Alaska, where there was visual sighting, radar sighting, eyewitness reports. I mean, you name it. This is about as close as you can get to an actual contact. Now, the skeptics will say, well, what about alien DNA? If people get abducted and their private parts are experimented with, there must be alien DNA all over the place. And what about an alien chip, an alien pen, an alien doorstop, anything swiped from a UFO? Well, do we have anything approaching that?
Well, I mean, that is not my area at all of expertise. I know that lots of people have described what they call, abductions or encounters with alien beings. But actually, as far as I'm concerned, we don't have enough data on that particular aspect of this issue to really that I can make use of as a journalist. And what I'm really focused on in this book, and what I think the most important data really states to all of us, is that there is a physical phenomenon in the sky that has actually landed on the ground, but it's a physical, some kind of apparently technological phenomenon that demonstrates all these different characteristics that we know very well, and we simply can't identify it. And I can't really go beyond that and talk about anything more than that, but to me that is important enough, and I think that's what we should focus on.
And also, some scientists who have looked at these things, their best shot is rather feeble. Some people have said that maybe it's ball lightning or maybe some kind of weather anomaly. And I think perhaps the one logical explanation might be experimental aircraft that are devised by the Pentagon. But some of these sightings involve aircraft that seem to defy all known laws of aerodynamics, right?
That is absolutely right, and you have aviation experts involved with these cases who will make that point, the people that really know what our absolute best technology can do. And it's been stated over and over again. And again, we go back decades with some of these sightings when the chances that we had such technology were even more remote. But even today, we still cannot explain through our own technology and through any kind of experimental technology what we have seen these things do. So I would have to agree with you. It's not something, that there's an easy explanation for. Yes, the skeptics will say, oh, in this case it was that, or in this case it was the planet Venus, or this or that. But if you look closely at the cases, the explanation usually does not fit the data. That's the problem. And sometimes they will give an explanation that definitely doesn't fit the data, and it can absolutely be ruled out by anybody who takes a close look. So we have a real problem here because we cannot explain these things.
Okay, well, let me ask you some questions that you've probably been asked hundreds of times. First question, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Why don't they simply extend an invitation to President Obama and say, here we are? Why do they keep buzzing our aircraft? Any thoughts?
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. That's a very frequently asked question. The problem is I'm a journalist looking at the data that we've collected about how these things behave. I'm in no position to answer any questions about why they do what they do or why they don't do what they do. Any answer to that question would be purely speculative. I mean, my job is to put forth the data of here they are, here's how they behave, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. And the why questions we're also curious about. That's why we need more of an investigation, actually, to find out some of the answers to that. But nobody can answer a question like that.
And personally, my own thought is that if they're that advanced, that is, they can go across star systems in a blink of an eye, they're probably thousands, millions of years ahead of us, in which case maybe we're not very interesting. Maybe they really don't make contact with us because, do we make contact with ants and bugs and cockroaches? No, we may step on a few of them, but we don't go down there and say, I bring you trinkets and bees and nuclear energy. I mean, maybe we're simply not on their radar screen. Well, let's talk about investigations. The United States government did have a body that investigated these things. It was called Project Blue Book. However, what happened to Project Blue Book, and what happened to the person who directed Project Blue Book?
Well, Project Blue Book, of course, as probably a lot of people know, was actually shut down. It went on for about 2 decades, founded in the early 50s, and was shut down in early 1970. The leading scientist from that group was J. Allen Hynek, who started out as a real debunker. I mean, a major skeptic. I mean, he thought all of this stuff was completely nonsense. He spent 2 decades working as a consultant to Project Blue Book and was the most consistent figure that the project had. And by the time it was shut down, he had come to realize that we have some kind of real mystery here. And he wrote a couple of books in the 1970s where he really sort of came out about the fact that he came to recognize the seriousness of the data, that we really have a mystery, we don't know what these things are, that UFOs are real.
Okay, Leslie, we run out of time.
Yeah.
We run out of time, unfortunately. Okay. But sum up your comments. So what happened to him? He became a believer, or at least somebody who understands that there is a scientific debate?
Exactly. I mean, I wouldn't call him a believer, and I don't like that word for myself, but somebody who recognizes that there is actual serious data here, and it's worthy of study, and there is a real phenomenon. There's something physical that exists here.
Okay, great. Well, we've run out of time. Once again, this has been Leslie Kean. The book is called UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. Thank you for being on Science Fantastic. Well, that summarizes this hour. So once again, stay tuned for Science Fantastic when we continue to probe the very limits of space, time, and our world.
Didn't get your question answered? Call Professor Kaku's hotline and leave your comments, questions, and thoughts at 866-323-2538.